Hey, regular viewer and subscriber Anthony Martinez said, why don't we do a video about emergency procedures? Oddly enough, there are CFIs in the world who say you should practice the emergency procedures for your check ride, but you shouldn't get in the habit of practicing them after that. I'm going to say that's dumb. There's nothing you can do well that you don't practice. We look for currency in aviation, but that's just 3 takeoffs and landings over 90 days. That's not proficiency. In all honesty, emergency procedures are something we practice and we put effort into and we learn the parameters of because someday we may need to do that. And when an emergency happens, it won't happen at the most convenient time. It'll just happen when it happens. Go ahead and click the like button below, comment on this video just like Anthony did and suggest a topic that you like, and please subscribe to the channel and even share this video on social media. Sharp-eyed viewers may notice that both Pat Brown and I have a collection of guitars in the background. That's because Pat and I both originally came from the music industry and switched careers into aviation long time ago. I firmly believe there's a real parallel between music and flying. And the reason is because there's a basic structure that we have to adhere to, but improvisation is going to be required. Consider this. That's an old classic called Nobody Knows You When You're Down and Out. It's got a little bit of Keith Richards in it, a little bit of Eric Clapton, and a whole lot of me. As long as I stay within that structure, I can do pretty much whatever I want as long as I stay in the right key. But if I stray outside of that, things start to get ugly. That's true of emergency procedures as well. Hopefully, you're never going to need to actually implement any of these procedures. But if you do, it would be wise if you didn't just learn it for your private or your commercial check ride and then never try it again. Remember, airline pilots recertify every 6 months. They're going to do an engine out. They're going to go through emergency procedures because those things might happen. And when the emergency happens is a really horrible time to start thinking, what was the procedure for this? I can't remember. Because you don't necessarily have that much time to deal with it. But if you're up to speed, you're good. Let's take the emergency descent for an example. It's in the Private Pilot Airman Certification Standard, and it's a fairly simple procedure. On the knowledge side, the examiner is going to want to know, why would we ever do this? And your job is to be able to explain, well, maybe we have an engine fire. Maybe we have something going on in the airplane that means we've got to get on the ground right now. And we need to do it in an organized fashion that's safe and predictable. We set up a basic speed that we're shooting for. That's going to depend on your aircraft and the right configuration for that speed. You're also going to want to be in a bank 30 to 45 degrees. And the reason for that is so that we keep a positive load factor on the airplane. We don't want to just nose over and go negative in our excitement. We want to be in a little bit of a bank, but you'll notice it's between 30 and 45 degrees. It's not an exact number. We've got 15 degrees of fudge factor in there. Maybe you like it at 30 degrees. Maybe you like it at 45. The examiner is going to go along with that, just as long as you understand why you're doing it and actually do it. We're also going to want to level off from that maneuver plus or minus 100 feet from the altitude the examiner gives us. Now that's what we train for with our CFI, and that's what we're going to do on our check ride if we're asked to do the emergency descent. But if we haven't practiced an emergency descent in a number of years, and many of us don't, and we do have an emergency, that's a really bad time to start thinking about, I wonder how I do this safely. I wonder how I do this in an organized fashion. What was that emergency descent speed? Should I have a bank or do I just go straight ahead? This is the difference between currency and proficiency. Just like playing a musical instrument. If I learn that piece and I play it 100 times, but then I don't play it again for 5 years, the odds of me just picking up the guitar and being able to whip through it are pretty slim. That's that thing where music and aviation both have a structure, but they both allow for some improvisation. When I do that emergency descent, I kind of have to think of why am I doing this and where am I going? Because let's face it, if I have an emergency and the point was to get on the ground and I establish a left-hand bank because that's my habit, but my emergency landing field is to the right, I kind of screwed up. This is all part of the process. You are the pilot in command. You are thinking about this and how does this happen in practice? Not just for a check ride, because none of this is really just to pass a check ride. That test, the practical test, is really about demonstrating your ability to be the pilot in command of an aircraft under any circumstance. And the potential for an emergency is one of those circumstances. Now, if you have a CFI who suggests you shouldn't really be doing emergency procedures on your own, they're not necessarily wrong. You might want to take a CFI along with you even after you've gotten your certificate, even if it's not your flight review, and say, I just want to work on this. Let's take off. It's a beautiful day. We'll go fly for a little bit, and let's do a couple emergency descents. Let's do a power off 180 to landing. Let's experience that again so I can remind myself what's the sink rate like. And speaking of sink rate, there are two terms you're going to see in the emergency descent that many people misunderstand. One is best glide and one is minimum sink rate. And you'd think, gee, those are the same thing, but they're really not. Minimum sink rate is more of a glider thing than an airplane thing, but best glide gives you the most distance for the altitude you've got. Minimum sink rate gives you the least altitude loss over a period of time. One is measured in distance, one is measured in time. These are things you're going to want to talk about and review with your CFI, and maybe do a little additional reading or watch some videos so you understand what's the difference between best glide and minimum sink. Because you might be asked that on your check ride, and more importantly, you might experience that in real life, and you need to figure out which configuration do I want, which speed am I shooting for, and why. Even on the emergency approach and landing, there are variables we have to consider. What's the wind doing? What's the terrain like? What are the obstacles? Where am I in the pattern? And you will see this a lot in flight training where somebody's flying what is euphemistically referred to as a 747 pattern. If I'm on a 3-mile final at 500 feet and I lose my engine, I'm not making it to the runway. If I have a headwind, I'm really not making it to the runway, which makes us ask, why are we 3 miles out on final at 500 feet? Tighten it up. The examiner's going to want to know not just what you're doing, but why you're doing what you're doing. So let's be thinking about why we're doing what we're doing and practice. Because if we practice after our check ride, we not only become current with our 3 takeoffs and landings every 90 days, we also could potentially become proficient. And proficiency is what we're looking for. And that doesn't matter if we're in the airplane, in the music studio, or anything else in life. You want to actually be good at what you're doing. And to get good, get some help. That's why CFIs exist. And they're not just for your primary training, they're for your whole flying career. You can always grab a CFI and say, hey, I want to go work on wheel landings. I want to work on my emergency descents. I'd like to get up to speed on some of the cross-country stuff in this new panel I've got with glass where I used to just have analog. It's perfectly okay. CFIs will be happy to go with you, and you might become a better pilot because of it. Big thanks to Anthony Martinez, a valued viewer of MadPropsAero, who is a subscriber, I hope like you are. Come on back sometime and let's see what we can come up with that might help you become a better, safer, more proficient pilot, and one who has more fun and maybe can afford it a little better than you thought you could. We'll catch you all next time right here on MadPropsAero.